First story. Analyzing my own fault in my wife affair. Married male, cheated on by wife and now in process of reconciliation. It occurred to me that I have turned into someone who alternates between wallowing in self-pity and indulging in self-righteous indignation. That's not who I want to be. All it does is make me miserable. My life experience has taught me that you can't dictate someone else's actions or feelings. You can merely act on your own in a way that does minimal harm. If that sounds like an impossible goal, it actually isn't. I used to get tremendously affected by bad drivers earlier. Then I realized all that raging only puts myself in danger and my health at risk, so now I am not that affected anymore. I focus on driving safely, defensively, and minimize the chance of confrontation or incident. I bring a lot of expectations to my relationship, both from myself and my wife, and I realize now the burden of those expectations can cause issues. If anything, the affair taught me to look inwards at myself a lot more. I always prided myself on being a loyal husband, a good father, a provider for the family. But now I realize that probably isn't enough. People have dreams, aspirations, hidden desires. They need to be validated by those they love. They need to feel not judged. Looking at it from my wife's point of view, her husband made some life choices that took him away, albeit temporarily, from her. He left her to mind the household and manage the growing kids, while he was away on work a lot and for extended periods of time. Perhaps if he'd asked her, she'd have told him that what they had was enough. There was no need for a bigger house, and she would manage fine with her trusty beat-up car a little longer. After all, he did insist on sending it for a proper servicing once a year. Perhaps she was happier with him close to her, sharing in the household duties, being a proper dad instead of her having to double up as both parents. Perhaps she thought I had my share of fun on the road, or that the distance was making us distant emotionally as well. Or it could be that she had some plans for herself. Turning 40 isn't easy, and it often brings a renewed focus on career. As you start to worry whether what you are doing is merely a means of making money, or something deeper and more meaningful. It's happened with me as well. She stood by me resolutely while I worked out my own career-related stuff a few years earlier. Perhaps she expected the same from me, and felt my attitude to her work was dismissive. Maybe we didn't share the same ideas of what constituted loyalty? Maybe she thought it was okay in my eyes for her to seek emotional support while I was not available. It seemed to come as a shock to her when I told her, after finding out, that the fact that she slept with the AP didn't hurt as much as the fact that she told him, and others, that she loved him. A lot of her friends probably have work spouses and their husbands are probably aware of it. Maybe I am the exception here. Why did the emotional part of the affair hurt me so much, though? Was it because I felt insecure that we no longer had what we once shared? Was it an assumption I made that, having survived and thrived through a decade and a half of marriage, with all its ups and downs, a temporary physical separation would not matter, that our emotional bonding would tide us through? I haven't confided in too many people about the affair, but those that I did talk to were unequivocal that it was her fault. This includes my wife as well, who blames herself squarely for the affair and its aftermath. We are reconciling solely because it was my choice to do so, after she confessed unreservedly, after being caught out, and begged me to take her back. So there is really no reason to turn the spotlight on myself, to ask these soul-searching questions on whether I was, in fact, as good a husband as I imagine myself to be. But it's really also the only way to move on. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying I was responsible for the affair. That burden is hers, and she knows it. But things don't happen for one reason alone. And if I can come out of this a better human being, it might be just the thing that prevents this sort of stuff happening again. Because, believe me, it changes everything in a way that can never be fully remedied. And I don't want to go through that, ever again. Has anyone gone through something similar? I came across Esther Perel's TED Talk even before I discovered the affair, and a lot of what she said resonated with me even then. It was only after day that I truly understood how profound some of her stuff is. I tried to get my wife to listen to the TED Talk, but she isn't a very intellectual person to start with, and it never went anywhere. You can take a horse to the water and all that shit. I think it is entirely possible to stick it out and to fix things so long as the guilty party takes the lead on repairing trust and both agree to individual and couples therapy to figure out how the pieces might fit back together. True dat. My so is somewhere in between. She takes responsibility for the affair, but isn't willing to look too deep into herself, probably for fear of finding out something she doesn't want to. I am still hopeful she will come to MC eventually, and for the right reasons. The fact, though, is that I am anything but an absentee husband. Even the decision to be away was arrived at after a lot of discussion, and she was extremely supportive in the beginning. While it was difficult on her and the kids, it was no picnic for me either. When I am at home, I spend a lot of time with her and each of the kids, playtime, story time, even pitching in with the homework wherever I can. I attend their PTMs and accompany my parents, in-laws and wife to their medical appointments. We've had quite a bit of illness in the family of late. Sometimes I can't, that's life I guess. I am confident that what I have provided to my family, both materially and emotionally, will result in my kids growing up to be well-balanced individuals and my parents dying happy someday. There is really not that much more I aspire to in life. Emotional well-being, fulfillment, happiness, stability, is largely the result of one's own choices. My spouse can't fulfill me. That's my job. That's what I am focusing on. Right now she is someone I love, but don't trust. I'm at the age where I have started worrying about my legacy. There are a couple of important things I am focused on completing this year. One of the things about us is that we work on projects really well. Once those are done, I obviously have some deep thinking and decisive action to work on. Now, she needs to go the IC. Even if she doesn't want to, she should do it for you. She needs to figure out why she did this, not in a superficial way, but what flaw in her character allowed herself to think this was acceptable. I know. It's very puzzling that when we talk about visiting a counselor and I ask her why she wants to, she has no clear answer. It's vague shit like, we need to work on our problems, both of us can learn a lot, etc. I am thinking, if I was in her position, I would just own up to the fact that I was a lying cheater and work with my spouse and the counselor to never let that happen again. What terms do I have to set out? Cut off all communication with AP, right? If affair was work-related, new job, right? Detailed timeline of affair, right? She must inform AP's spouse or partner of the affair, right? Yes to all except informing AP's spouse, but it's possible she knows because they are not together anymore. He was a shitty husband and bad father by all accounts. Anyway, I still did not tell AP's spouse. Was tempted to many times. And it wouldn't have been too difficult given that we have common friends, but the headspace I was in back then, it was tough enough to manage my own emotions, let alone dump that shit on someone else. She left him of her own accord sometime later. I have felt the rage and it's not a good feeling, mate. I hate losing control of myself, and that's the closest I have come to doing it in my life. Fact of the matter is that a number of her close friends have been unfaithful to their spouse, which is something I find very puzzling. Most of them only AOs, but some crossed over into PA as well. These were the friends who encouraged and enabled her. They are still in her life, though I keep most of them at arm's length. One of the conditions I made was that she break off all ties with them, but she refused, saying that she was solely to blame and she couldn't imagine being without her closest friends. Finding out about the sexual affair was the hardest thing for me to deal with. In fact, it was the trigger for me demanding a divorce. But when I look back on it now, it bothers me less than an actual, prolonged, emotional affair. She was involved with a married man who had kids of her own. I know they planned a future together. Her friends were aware of it and encouraged and enabled her. I have evidence that some of them whom she is still in touch with actively urged her to continue the relationship, and told her that she had a better future with that guy than me. My kids have met him. So have my parents and in-laws. Although the nature of their relationship was not revealed, it caused enough unease in my home that I was warned about it right at the outset. My point is, I don't condone physical infidelity but can at least get it. A one-night stand that she immediately regretted would have been much preferable to this hell. I mean, I can get someone being tempted to have a fling with a younger person, or even an ex at a certain point in life, when you feel the need to be validated. But I wouldn't be foolish enough to mistake it for love or a substitute for a long, fairly happy marriage. Maybe I'm not explaining it well enough. She is an independent, thinking woman who chose to be unfaithful. To that extent, she is the only one to blame for her affair, period. I am only trying to recognize my own role in what drove her to it, or whether, as most of you are trying to tell me, I had any role to play in it at all. I'm sorry if my post comes across as self-flagellating. That certainly wasn't the intention. What I didn't put in the original post, but was at the back of my mind, is that all my life I have struggled with something inside me holding me back. Though I have an excellent education that I worked hard for, my career is nothing to write home about. I have a creative and artistic side, but it's restricted to my hobbies, and I never was good enough or dedicated enough to do anything great in that field. I love my kids and do what I can for them, but I'm no superted. For a long time I thought being available, gentle, wise, affectionate, generous and romantic, though not flamboyantly so, was enough. Obviously she wanted more. The thing is that, so far, she has refused to get counseling, either for herself or as a couple. It's difficult for me to convince her that this needs closure, so I am seeking a way without destroying my family. I want my family, I need it. It will destroy me if I am the one who willingly broke us up. I have been told what you and most others here are saying by my closest friend, but he is in the minority of one. Everyone else who knows, including my parents and sibling, have counseled me to forgive and move on. If things were a little different, say this had happened 5 years ago, the outcome would have been very different. But I'm just not in the right headspace for a divorce and all the agony it brings. You're completely correct about the fact that this may happen again. In fact, there is no trust anymore. It is a sucky way to live, and I seriously hope it doesn't take a big toll on my health. I hope you consider all these different points of view. I will, I promise. It's so refreshing to get all these perspectives. One of the things I have been struggling with is getting some suitable advice from people who have been in a similar situation. One close friend who has only my interest at heart, has advised me pretty much the way most of you are. It's not that I don't heed him, but the family and social pressure on me making a clean break are immense. Fuck that, I'm just a chicken shit. Smiley. I could identify with almost everything you described because that's exactly how it went down in my case as well. That turned into repeated denials and gaslighting. When faced with incontrovertible evidence, a turnaround into abject groveling and refusal to leave. The only difference is, in my case, it hasn't happened again, yet. I don't know whether that's a consolation or the scariest thing ever. Even with therapy, I am holding on to the hope that she will eventually come to couples counseling and we will be able to work through these issues, eventually. She is ready, but not to analyze where she went wrong and how she can learn from it. I want her to say that because generic BS like we both need to learn from our mistakes just isn't cutting it. 5-year update, stayed together despite misgivings. Summary, my wife of then 15 years cheated on me with her boss 5 years ago and repeatedly denied it till confronted with incontrovertible evidence and a threat to divorce. We stayed together primarily because I didn't want a divorce which would be hard on the family. I was torn up about it and posted here pondering my own role in the affair having taken place. Reddit stepped up and assured me it wasn't so. I read every reply on that thread, and it really helped me largely relieve myself of the burden of feeling I had somehow precipitated the affair by my own actions, be it by being away on work for long periods or not paying enough attention to her needs, etc. 5 years down, we are still together. That might be perplexing to some, but let me answer some questions you may have. Did I forgive her? Yes. It took a while and several long, difficult conversations for her to realize that I desperately needed to know why it happened. She took full responsibility for the affair, and said that hurting me the way she did was the worst mistake she has ever made in her life and something that would haunt her forever. Did she stray again? There were several Redditors who reminded me of the old adage, once a cheater, always a cheater. But she did all the right things, quit that job, broke of all ties with AP, apologized repeatedly for what she did to me and the family. Do I trust her? Well, yes and no. I go through her texts and have her location tracked mutually, but as time passed, found myself doing so less and less. There haven't been any red flags. How did we repair the relationship? I'd mentioned in the old post that we were good at doing projects together. Managing COVID was a big one. Our kids lost 2 grandparents in 2 years and almost a third. We moved into a bigger place, our dream home, and that took up a lot of energy and attention. Got a dog, which has just been an amazing and unique parenting experience. Kids are older now, one has started college. We continue to travel for pleasure occasionally, a shared passion. Another thing I realized was the need to have a life outside of us, so I put together a band and we perform a few gigs a year. I took control of my career and landed a better and less stressful job. Encouraged her to pursue her home-based business and eventually to land a job with a startup in a different field from where she was earlier. We spent time together and talk about stuff that's bothering us. We do fight on occasion but focus on resolving things rather than let them simmer. What about the enablers? I had mentioned she has a few friends who were aware of and even actively encouraged her to pursue the affair despite being close to me as well. For a while after moving on, I voiced my discontent that these people were still in my life, but her stand was that she alone was responsible for the affair and not them. I finally realized that all I needed to do was to cut them out of my own life and not bother about anything else. I systematically went about it and am now LCNC with that bunch. Nothing dramatic, just quietly cut the cord. She is still friends with them, but she knows how I feel, so meets them only on occasion and is much more transactional with them. How am I now? I have to say that, despite having some of the emotions come up every now and then, by and large I am happy. My family and career keep me busy and fulfilled. My music keeps me sane. I have actively dialed down the drama in my life, a big contributor being no longer close to those enabler friends. I've consciously pursued my own interests and am a bit more assertive about my own needs. I am attentive to hers and try not to argue or nitpick, which have been integral to my nature for a long time. So things go on, and I guess 5 years is good enough to call myself an affair survivor. We celebrated our 20th anniversary and it was wonderful. Thanks again for listening and all those helpful comments from way back. I'm pretty sure I wouldn't have been able to get back on my feet had it not been for all of you. I went through a lot of emotions, anger, sadness, self-pity in the whole process, but kept myself sane by documenting everything I had and at one point letting her know that I knew and turning to my only supportive friend for comfort and advice. It wasn't easy. At one point, I realized that something has gotta give, so told her as calmly as I could that I was done with the gaslighting, and she was free to live her own life. Just leave me alone. That hit her hard, and after that she came clean, and we were able to start slowly moving forward. Did I report the boss to HR? No, she worked with him in his own enterprise, which collapsed later. I heard his wife left him, not sure over this matter or something else. We didn't have any friends in common and I don't know his wife at all. I seriously considered telling her at one point but then chickened out. Our child they don't know. My wife wanted to tell the older one but I stopped her. The younger one as well, too young to know all this. Is there any particular reason the kids should know? I'm asking out of genuine curiosity. I'm a bit stunned that you consider what I'm doing lying to my kids. They're just kids, they love both their parents, and we have never discussed any of this in front of them. My relationship with my wife is our business alone, unless it affects the kids in some significant way, e.g., divorce custody issues. I can't imagine I would voluntarily disclose to my kids their mom's affair, especially after we have reconciled. I have asked myself what happy means many times over the past 5 years. I think the term gets bandied about far too easily. Someone once told me marriage requires constant work, and the day one of us stops working is the day to call it quits. I am reading each comment here, and a lot of you are saying things that do resonate with me on some level. Suffice to say, I still see her doing the work. This may sound paradoxical coming from me, but why do you want to stay with a man who is, as you say, neither a good husband nor a good father? The one thing I have been able to do in my case is separate my wife's cheating behavior from her general conduct as a good mom and a good except for this wife. Of course, jury's out on whether it is the right thing. Also, the level of enabling your husband's friends are indulging is much more intense than was in my wife's case. If they are still enabling him to pursue affairs, you need to put a stop to it and break off with this man. Of course, it's very easy to give that advice when it's about other people. Maybe I should shut and focus on my own unresolved issues now. Smiley. The fact that she didn't go to MC when I suggested it is very disappointing to me to this day. There was one occasion when she said that she was ready for IC and in fact even attended a few sessions, but was reluctant to share anything with me, which didn't make any sense. This was quite early on in the reconciliation process. She stopped after a couple of sessions anyway. I tried IC very early on, but chose the wrong professional. It was a little hilarious actually in retrospect. The guy seemed a bit uncomfortable and threw out some homilies and I walked out of there with a firm nope. But I have a very good friend who is a doctor and has gone through some serious shit himself in his personal life. He is pretty much the only person who told me to proceed with the divorce when I found out that she was cheating. He knows everything and has my back. If it wasn't for him, I don't know what place I would be in today. Every time we meet for dinner or drinks, and we live in different cities, it's worth its weight in gold and way better than any therapy session.